Until now, we have only created EDMX file, that is Entity Data Model. Now let us generate database from it. Right click anywhere on the EDMX file and say generate database from model. It will ask you to connect to a particular database. So let us go for new connection. Now it will ask you what is the server name that you want to connect to. So my server name is Aspire, but if you don't know what is your SQL server name, then you can always give dot. Dot always refers to your local SQL server. Okay, now go down. Here you will be asked to select and enter the database name. So it's a drop down, and this is my database name. You selected it over here. Now say OK. You can alternatively even test your connection. Yeah, test connection succeeded. Now you can say OK. Notice that it will also create a connection string for yourself. So this is my connection string. It says that the data source, that means the SQL server, is dot, that means my local server. Initial catalog, which means my database name, is employee information system. And then integrated security is true, multiple active result set is true, and app is entity framework. Just say enter. You can select the latest version of entity framework that you want to use. Enter. Now it is saying that whatever you just asked me to generate, that means as per the EDMX file, whatever two tables I have to generate and the association between them, it will be generated as per this database script. This script is called as data definition language script. Okay, so it is the same as that you write in this SQL Server Management Studio. Here, whatever script you write, the same script is over here. Okay, now it is being saved in this particular file, eis.edmx.sql. Okay, this file will get generated over here. In EF folder, you will also see that particular file. Okay, now what is it writing in that file? So first of all, this is a standard thing. A quoted identifier has to be turned off before you do anything on that particular database. Then you have to use this particular database. Then it is doing a lot of null checks, and finally first thing that is doing is, if there is any foreign key, then it will drop those foreign keys. If there is any existing table, it will drop those existing tables, and then it will start creating tables. So the first table that it is creating is employee. While creating this table, it is considering department ID as just another column in that table. Okay, it is not attaching any foreign key at the moment. Here also in department, it is only having one ID, which is the identity column, that means the primary key. Here also ID is the primary column. That's it. Till now foreign keys have not been taken care of. After all the uh, tables got created, after that it is setting the primary key constraint. So it is saying that remember, in employee table we have one ID, and that ID is basically a clustered index ID, and it will be treated as a primary key. Okay, and remember that while creating a department table, we created this ID column. Now that is again a clustered key, and it is a primary key. And likewise, after that, it is creating the foreign key constraints. So now it is saying that, see, do you remember in employees table, we created departments using the department ID. So that department ID should actually reference to the department's table. DB object means table, and it will be treated as a foreign key. Okay, and in departments, it is not creating any foreign key. It is only creating this constraint that, whenever I refer to department ID through the employee, then it should route to the department ID in the departments. And this is foreign key constraint. This is the association, employee department association. Okay, so this is all that it is doing. It has not set any foreign key in department table. Okay, remember that. Now here your script has ended. Now let me hit enter to this. And as you can see, this EIS EDMX SQL file got generated over here. This file got generated over here, as it said that in entity framework folder, I'll be creating that file. So till here it kept its promise. But along with this, it also created these two additional things. Okay, it never talked about it. It only said that I'll be creating eis.edmx.sql. Then what are context and TT? So this is basically the context of your database. If you understand, in every programming language, there's always a context in which you work. Okay, so even this database object, whichever you're working with, it needs to have some context. Okay, and that is that context. And this eis.tt has various CS files which actually represent your tables. So here, like employee has a class employee which represents your table, and all the properties are actually as good as the columns in that particular table. Okay, so you're representing that database table in the form of this class. These are also called as models of your database or your database model. Okay, and this is called as context of your database. Okay, when you say context, let me open this file and show it to you. What it does is, it basically is a class, also called as container. Some people call it container, some people call it context. It basically derives from DB context class. Okay. Now, what does this context file do? Context file basically gives an overview of how your database is going to be. It is going to have employees and departments table. Okay. And how will you represent those tables? In the form of database set. Okay, every table is represented as a DB set. And DB set of what? Of this particular object. And what is this object? This is your database model, the model that we saw over here. Okay, so this is how all this works. Now, there's a very important point to remember here. When you go to EDMX and say generate database from model, all it creates is this EIS EDMX SQL file having the script required to create that database. Okay. Second thing that it creates is the database context. And the third thing that it creates is the database models. Okay. So these are the only three things that it has done. Okay. Now, if you go and see in SSMS, that is Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, then your tables are still not created in the database. Okay, so it has not actually created the database. The command says generate database from model, but actually what it does is it only generates these files. The database is not generated yet. But you can do that using this particular script file. So just go to EIS EDMX SQL and just hit this particular execute button. So this will execute this particular script that I have just explained to you, and it will create that particular database objects. So this is how you execute it. Now, while executing also, it will once again cross-check that you want to execute it on which SQL server and for which database. So once again, dot, which is my local SQL server. You could also give this particular name Aspire. Okay, and this Aspire name basically came from my machine name because my machine's name is Aspire, as you can see over here. That is why server name is Aspire. So you can give that particular Aspire name, or you can just write here dot. So I'm giving Aspire, and of course Windows authentication will be used, and password if you can choose to remember if you like, but I'm not giving any password because I'm using just Windows authentication. You could also use SQL authentication if you like. Now, database. Which database is it? So my database is Employee Information System. So I'll choose that particular database, and then I'll hit enter. Now the script will get executed on that particular database, and see, all the commands got completed successfully. Now if I go back to my database, if I go to the tables and I refresh, I will see those particular tables. Now once again, let us closely examine these tables. As I told you before, employee will definitely have a foreign key for department, but department will not have a foreign key for employees. Okay, notice that. Now why did it do it? The reason for doing this is that there should be at least one table to begin with, which does not have to worry about all the dependencies. Okay, so one table in your database will always be a table which won't have any dependency. So it will always start creating department first, and then in the department you will have some department ID. It will get auto generated because it's the primary key, and now you have department ID. Then it will create employee because employee will have a column called as department ID, and there it will require that department ID. Okay, now let us say that it had created employee ID also over here. then in that case it would be so much difficult for it. Which table should I create first? It is like egg first or chicken first. Okay, so you cannot create egg also, you cannot create chicken also. So you need to choose to have at least one table which does not require any foreign keys, and this is what it has done. So all this you would have to think if you would have created those database tables on your own, and that is why it is always better to leave such complications to the entity framework, because humans are prone to error, machines do not make mistakes. So leave it to the machine, it will generate your database. Okay, now this completes your entity framework creation along with your database generation.